Hola amigos, in today's episode we're gonna go to the past, 4 years to the past, to an image that I took and edited back then. And after I edit, we're gonna finish here. So let's go to Lightroom. This is the image raw format that I took 4 years ago. I like it because I have two cranes in almost in formation, one with the wings down, one with the wings up. And we typically see images of cranes. Cranes come here to New Mexico during the winter, central New Mexico, along the Rio Grande, and we see thousands and thousands of cranes. And many times we see images of a single crane or a large group of cranes. And after I did my edit 4 years ago, I ended up here. Looking at this image with fresh eyes, there are a few things I would like to do different on a new edit. One, I would like to stand out the cranes more from the background. The color is a little bit off. We have a few distractions like this white line that was on the hill that points to the head of the crane that is very noticeable after a while. And then we have this area here on the top left, high area of contrast, that because it's too close to the edge, it kind of magnifies its importance. We like to work on that section. And the crop is also a little bit off, I think, looking at it with fresh eyes. We're going to use a combination of Topaz Photo AI and Lightroom. Topaz is going to help us with another issue, which is we look at the cranes, is that the focus is not that sharp. I'm at 560 millimeters, and I was using at that time a UV filter that later I discovered was making the images soft when I had the lens fully extended or extended near its extreme. And that's where that effect was becoming more noticeable. So I would like to add a little additional sharpen to the cranes using Topaz Photo AI. I also have a little bit of noise. This image is at ISO 1000, and Topaz is going to do a beautiful job in removing the little noise that is on the image. So we start with our raw image, and I'm going to go to File, Extras or Plugin, and Process with Photo AI. This is going to open Photo AI. It's going to analyze the image automatically and figure out what it thinks it needs. So here we are. It automatically, the autopilot added the noise module, and it did a very nice job of reducing the noise. I hope you can see it on your screen. It's just the fine texture that we had primarily on the background. He also gave us a few suggestions because now I'm using version 3.2 of Photo AI, and that one, instead of adding the modules automatically, puts them at the bottom as suggestions. One of the suggestions is sharpen, and it automatically created a mask. The mask is not perfect. There are a few areas that we need to refine. So I'm going to click on sharpen, and it adds sharpen as another layer. And now it's calculating. Is using the standard model. With version 3.2, we added 3 new models to Photo AI: lens blur, natural, and refocus. But when I went and used those models, they gave me kind of weird texture on the crane. The standard model is the one that works the best. So let's keep the standard model. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so we can better evaluate. Visualizing, and you can see the additional sharpness without overdoing it on the head and the body and the wings of the crane. Now we want to make sure that this sharpen is applied throughout the two cranes. So I'm going to go to edit selection. I'm going to use the brush. I'm going to make it small and make sure I paint around the areas that is missing, like the beak, this part of the wing, the edge of this wing, and some of the tips of the wings to make sure that those feathers are included in the sharpen. We don't have to have a perfect selection because Photo AI is going to automatically look in those areas for what it thinks it needs. But we want to make sure all those areas are covered. here the legs, return to controls, it's initializing again, and I think this is good enough. Autopilot has selected the strength of 75, and I think that's giving us very natural looking results on the crane. Just additional detail, as you can see. And now we're going to export, and we're exporting a DNG back to Lightroom. And we're back in Lightroom, and we started with this image here and we ended up here. And one of the things you're going to notice is the colors are way off. And what's happening is when the DNG gets returned to Lightroom, something is happening in that transition where either Photo AI or Lightroom are not coordinating what is the right color profile that is either embedded on the metadata and it needs to be read out. Sometimes for this image is selected camera standard. Now is selected Adobe Vivid when I typically use Adobe Color. But that's easy to correct. We're gonna go to Profile, change Adobe Vivid to Adobe Color. The color is still a little bit off. And I'm gonna go to White Balance, and under Custom, I'm gonna select Auto, and I'm correcting the color cast that was there and using Adobe Color. And I think this is gonna give us a better starting point. So Adobe Color and automatic white balance, I think it's working better. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna crop. We have a big area that we don't need. So let's do the crop first. I'm gonna maintain a 2:3 ratio. I'm gonna change the angle so that it looks like the cranes are flying a little more in the vertical direction. Maybe that's too much. I want to keep more room ahead of the cranes than behind, and I want to keep the distance between the tip of this wing and the bottom and the other one on the top about the same. I turn off the lights in Lightroom with the letter L, and that helps me visualize better without the distractions of Lightroom. Perhaps a little bit tighter, something like that, I think is going to do it even more. And that's it for our crop. I think it's looking very nice. And then we talk about some distractions, right? The line and the upper corner. So let's deal with that first. I'm gonna go to the remove section. We have the clone, heal, and remove. I'm gonna stay in remove. I'm not gonna use generative AI, which means automatically it's gonna select content aware fill. So I'm gonna make my my brush a little bit bigger. I'm gonna select the area, making sure I don't touch the wing and I don't touch the beak. And maybe this area here. And I think it did a very nice job of getting rid of that line. And I had the opacity at 74%. I can increase the opacity, play with the opacity to try to get a more natural looking result. I'm gonna do the same thing for the upper left. I'm gonna select, and remember, we did a significant crop, so there's a lot of image around us, and you're doing repairs near the edges. You need to make sure you go past the visible portion of the image and select an area outside to make sure that it's included in what Lightroom is going to look at repairing. Otherwise, we're going to run into problems. And I think that one is looking better. I'm going to tell it to refresh. We can refresh a number of times. I think that one took 3 tries. That one, I think, is going to look better. And I'm gonna go to the opacity, maybe something like 80%. You can play with the opacity to blend the new repair with the information that was there to start with. Oh, but there we have another spot here that I want to get rid of. I think that's it for now. So now let's work on separating the cranes from the background. And to do that, we're gonna use light, transitions in light, in temperature, in saturation, in color, and in detail. So I'm gonna go to masks and I'm gonna select the subject, and it did a very nice job on selecting the cranes. Nice job, but not perfect, because if I make it bigger, we can see areas around the wing and the beak that Adobe Lightroom didn't quite deal with perfectly. So we're going to subtract with the brush with auto mask enable, and I'm just going to keep the center of the brush right between the wings, and that is going to look for textures that are similar to what's right in the center, and it's going to try to protect the wings provided I don't go over. I'm doing it quick so you don't get bored. But now we have a good mask. What do I want to do with the cranes? Well, I think the exposure was fine, but I'm going to bring the highlights up a bit and the whites down. Maybe open the shadows a touch. In color, I'm going to make them warmer, just a touch. And in saturation, I'm going to increase the saturation a bit. And you have to play between warmth and saturation to make sure that we don't overdo it. So there we are with the cranes. Now we go to effects, and we're going to add some texture to get all that detail on the feathers and a touch of clarity. Just be careful with clarity because it's very easy to overdo it. So just a touch of clarity. Now let's work on the heads of the cranes. We have this area of the head, the cheeks of the crane, that have very white feathers and they reflect the sun quite a bit. The nice thing about using RAW and staying with the DNG coming back is that we have a lot of information still on the file and we can recover quite a bit of detail. So I'm going to create a new mask with a brush. I'm going to paint the areas that we want to affect, which is this area right here. And undertone, we're going to play with bringing exposure down, bringing the whites down, and perhaps bringing the highlights up. We want to have a good result. If we use only exposure, it starts to look a little muddy. It's a combination of exposure, negative whites, and perhaps a little bit of positive highlights. And then we can go under effects and add additional texture, and clarity is going to add contrast to the few middle tones that may be in that area. And we turn off that mask that was before, and this is now. So it's looking more natural with a little bit of detail added to it. Talking of detail, we have the forehead of the two cranes that I want to pop. So we're going to add another mask with a brush. I'm going to paint those areas, including the eye. And I'm going to bring the exposure up a bit. And then under color, we're going to bring the saturation up. And we want that area to pop. So this is before and this is now. So I think we have the cranes done. Now, to make them stand out from the background, we need to do kind of opposite things to the background, right? Make it a little cooler, a little darker. We can go to create a new mask and select the background. But what's going to happen is that Adobe Lightroom takes the whole image, and to select the background, it starts with the subject and it's going to subtract the subject. And we know that in the subject, it didn't do a perfect job. We had some issues around the wings. But we already spent time creating a new mask for the subject. So we can go to that first mask, go to the three dots, and do duplicate and invert. Duplicate and invert is going to take advantage of the work we had already done. And now, to the tone, we're going to make it darker to the background a little bit, like a 0.3. I don't want it too dark, so I'm going to bring the shadows up a bit. Under color, let's make it a little more blue, a little cooler to offset the warmth that we did to the cranes. And I think it has a little bit of a purplish tone, so I'm going to make it towards the green. Play with temperature and tint. And in effects, I'm going to decrease texture to soften that background. I'm going to decrease clarity to soften it even more. If I turn off the mask, this was before and this is after. Before and after. And by having those complementary edits to the cranes and to the background, now the cranes pop out more from the background. I think that's it for mask. So we're going to close mask. And a couple of more things to do. Under effects, I have a slight vignette, and in detail, we are applying a mask first so that additional sharpening we add in doesn't get applied to the background. We hit the Alt key as we adjust amount, turn it into grayscale, and it's easier to visualize the amount of sharpening and detail that we're doing. So we started here, and we're finishing with this image where we remove distractions, we change the color quite a bit, we use transitions in temperature and color and detail and saturation to make the grains pop more from the background, and it also looks almost like a 3D effect, right? There is that more depth between the grains and the background. What do you think of this image? Do you like it? Well, don't forget to subscribe if you're liking this series of videos. Tell your friends about my channel, help me grow it, send me your comments, and I'll see you next time.